Is moving to Italy really worth it? We're going to be deep diving into this question in today's video, and I'm going to be giving you my honest pros and cons for moving to Italy to kind of help you to arrive at a definitive answer for yourself. Because you see, you can search on YouTube and find countless videos that will talk to you about moving to Italy, the process of doing so, what it's like to settle in. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the right decision for you, because there are so many individual factors that you have to take into consideration that some videos don't really touch on. And so today we're going to be talking about those aspects, because we're not carbon copies of one another, and what works for me may not work for you. And so I hope this video can help. And by the end of the video, I hope that you feel a little bit more sure about your decision, whether it is you're going to move here or whether you've decided it's not really for you. So let's talk about the first thing that you need to think about, which is littered with pros and cons, and that is your stage in life when you decide to make this decision. Because I'm not one to get hung up on age. I'm 41 years old, but I definitely do not feel my age, and I think that's a good thing. I really don't agree with the way that society tries to compartmentalize people into different boxes depending on their age in life and the kinds of things that they should have achieved or done by that time. I don't agree with that. I'm a big believer in that you can do whatever you want at any age in your life. And there are plenty of success stories that you can read about to prove just how true that is. So this isn't that aspect that I'm focusing on, but more the fact that your experience here in Italy is of course going to be different depending on what stage in life you're at. If you're retired, you're going to have a totally different experience to somebody who has come here to work or to start a family, for example. So we're going to talk about some of the most popular categories in terms of age when it comes to moving to Italy. And the first I would say is like in your 20s, early 20s through to late 20s. This tends to be a popular time to move to Italy because you're fresh out of university. If you've gone to university, you're ready for new experiences. You want to travel, you want to discover the world. Maybe you've met an Italian person and fallen in love, whatever it may be. But it's a kind of era of adventure and also of discovery. And what a great way to do that than by spending some time living here in Italy. I think at this age, it can be wonderful for your personal development and your growth. You are going to learn so much from the experience, and guaranteed, whether you choose to stay here on a long-term basis or go back to the country you're from, you will definitely have evolved and changed as a person, most probably for the better. However, it can be a tricky time to move here when you are in your 20s, because a lot of the time people don't really know what they want from their life at that point. And it can be difficult to come to another country and try to find yourself. If you have no idea what you want to work as, if you have no idea kind of what your next step in your life is, I wouldn't necessarily say that Italy is the best place to try to figure that out. The employment situation here is complicated, to say the least. You've probably read in news reports before or heard from previous videos of mine or other content creators on YouTube just how many Italian people actually leave this country in kind of search of career opportunities elsewhere. So it's not an easy place to come to try to discover what you want to do for your career unless you are laser focused and you know exactly what you want to get from your experience. So that is a huge con, I would say. Like, employment here in Italy is tricky. The working culture is tricky, especially the further south that you go. And the pay is not really the best. In fact, I would probably say the best pay is in the north of Italy, but even then that is profession dependent. So it can be tricky to try to figure out your career here in your 20s. I would say sometimes it's better to come here with more of a clear focus and idea in order to really see success. Now, moving here in your 30s, which is the category that I come under, I would say that this can be a great time to move here because you've got some life experience under your belt and you've basically got more of an idea, hopefully, of what it is you want to gain from life. However, moving here in your 30s does mean you're going to suddenly become very aware of how Italian families are kind of ready to settle down at this stage. People are thinking about marriage, having children. Like, there is a real focus on growing a family, usually in your 30s into your 40s. And if you are not in that position yourself, you can really feel a little bit of an outsider and maybe considered to be a little bit strange. So I think it can be a tricky age to move here if you don't know, again, what it is you want to gain from your experience. If you're here and you know that you want to grow and develop and you're ready for, everything that comes with that, then fair enough. But if you come here and you expect to, have an easier ride because you're a little bit older and you're a bit wiser in that sense, I think you can be surprised still, because it isn't easy when you see everybody around you settled down or kind of building their lives out in this way. So I think it can be a tricky age to move here, depending on what your intention is. And then if we jump all the way to retirement, I actually think in some respects this could be the best age to move to Italy. I think when you move here, later in life, not only do you have like a wealth of wisdom from kind of all the experiences you've had up to now, but also you're going to be operating to a whole different schedule here in Italy. You are not going to be dependent on the working world, so you're not going to have all those stresses to deal with. If you have delays with bureaucracy, as much as it might, cause you a bit of a headache, it's not going to be as stressful as if you had to also balance that with other commitments like work. And also you're going to have the time available to really appreciate this country, to travel, to explore, to take part in activities. One thing I would say is moving here in your 20s, your 30s, or even your 40s, if you're working here, time is often limited. I spend a lot of my time at work, and it does mean that, sometimes when I'm free, I just want to relax because I'm so tired, or I feel the pressure to go and explore because I don't feel like I'm making the most of my experience here. But I think when you're retired, you have, an abundance of time. And so it really helps you to appreciate this country in a totally different way. So I think in that sense, it can be a really beautiful moment in your life to think about moving here. However, I would say in retirement, it's not easy necessarily to learn a language later in life if you don't already speak it. I'm talking from personal experience. I'm of course not retired, but I'm not exactly old, and I struggle to learn Italian. So it's not easy when you've kind of got a different attention span. When you're older, you might be out of the habit of studying. It does take people longer to learn the older you get. There's scientific backing to prove that this is true. So I would say that can be a difficult aspect, trying to learn a language, trying to kind of pick up new skills later on in life. I would also say as well, it can be difficult to adapt when you're older. Now, this is a huge generalization because we are not carbon copies of one another, as I said before, but I do believe that when you're older, generally speaking, you have set routines and set things that you're used to. And it can be hard sometimes to change that and to shift and to get used to new things and new ways of doing things. But if you move here to Italy, that is exactly what you have to start getting used to, because you are not necessarily going to be able to have everything that you are used to exactly as it is up to now. And so this is hugely important to consider. If you are a flexible person and you feel that you can go with the flow a bit and you can change and adapt certain parts of your life in order to settle better here in Italy, then there's no problem. But if you're somebody who takes comfort from routine and from having things in a particular order or way, you might struggle a little bit here in Italy because it really isn't like that. And so I think when you move here later in life, that can be more difficult sometimes because you've got a lifetime of habits behind you that you might not be ready to break. Now, the second thing to think about is what you want to gain from your experience. Because you see, if you come here and you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to develop as a person, this is one of the best decisions you could ever make. Italy, without a doubt, has been my greatest teacher for nearly 6.5 years. And I honestly don't think I would be the person I am sitting here today had it not been for this country. However, it can also be very, very tough to live here. And so, if you are here and you know that you are ready to accept everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then I think you can make a real success of yourself here in Italy. So that part, I think you can do well at. However, if you are here for career progression, this is where things can get a little bit murky. As I've already mentioned before, the kind of working world here isn't the best. A lot of Italians emigrate because they just cannot find any opportunities for themselves here. The pay isn't fantastic, or, just the way that the working culture is organized here isn't necessarily the best. And so people decide to work in other countries in order to improve their prospects. You've also got to consider that depending on what it is you want to do, because some careers I feel flourish in Italy, but others really don't. So it really does depend on what it is that you want to do. But if you are in a career where, you're not sure if it's really something that's going to do well here, I would think very carefully about your decision to move here. Because you see, the problem you have is that when you move here to Italy, you have to get used to perhaps taking a potential pay decrease, depending on what you're working as and what you're currently earning. You've got to get used to a whole new set of conditions and ways of working that you may not be used to. And you have to get used to a different mindset and approach to work. Again, something that could be completely different to what you've become accustomed to. So working here isn't easy. It has probably been one of the things that has tested me the most, predominantly because there have been so many situations I found myself in that I've never experienced in the UK. And for that, it has tested me a lot. But again, it depends what you want to gain from your overall experience. If you're here purely for career progression, really think about your decision, because it does depend what your career is and how you think your time here in Italy can help with that progression. If you're here to grow and develop, it's not as important in terms of the work that you do here. Of course, you want to earn fairly decent money. You want to be in a job that you kind of enjoy. It makes a difference. But essentially, your focus isn't on building a career here. So you're here to learn and to grow and to develop. So whatever you end up working as is going to teach you something. Now, if you're here, for example, for love, say you've met an Italian person who's whisked you off your feet and you're ready to settle down, and this does happen to a lot of expats. In fact, it's the number one thing that people ask me when I say I moved here. They're like, did you move for love? My answer is always no, that came later. But yes, people naturally assume this is why people move to Italy. I will say that you have to be really realistic with kind of the quality of life that you think you're going to have here in Italy. Because if you move here for love, at some point, probably that's going to end up in marriage or in starting a family. And you have to think about the implications that's going to have for you, because it's not necessarily easy to adapt to Italian culture, particularly when you're in a relationship with an Italian person. There are lots of things you have to consider, including like the closeness of his family unit or her family unit. And also you've got to think about how would it work to raise a child in this country? What would it be like to kind of have a child growing up in the place that you're living in and experiencing everything that you experience, and trying to also instill in them your culture when you're living in a culture here that can be very dominant in terms of its effect. Yeah, it's a lot, I would say. And so you really have to question this and ask yourself what you feel comfortable with doing in that respect. And also you've got to feel comfortable for yourself. I'm a big believer in that you should never, ever do anything for anybody else but for yourself. And as much as that sounds really selfish, there is so much truth in that. You should never move to Italy just because your partner is from Italy. You should do it because you want to do it. And why this is so important is because if you do it for the other person, later on down the line, if you find that life here is difficult, it's not what you expected, you're not enjoying yourself, you're going to become resentful because you're going to blame your partner for the reason that you're living in that country, when really it was your decision to do it. So you need to decide within yourself and feel comfortable within yourself about the decision that you make, and not do it for anybody else. And that's why I stress this point so much, because it's really, really important. Another consideration you've got to think about is the duration of your stay. Do you intend to live here on like a semi-permanent basis, or do you really intend to be a full-blown resident of Italy? This impacts so much, not only from bureaucracy, through your taxes, if you're working, through all of this, but also in terms of the kind of life you're going to lead here. If you're here on a permanent long-term basis, then you've got to find ways to integrate into your community. You've got to find ways to start building your connections and your community here. And you've also got to think about the type of home that you want to be living in, because of course, if you're here just for a couple of months, it's not so important. But if you're here on a long-term basis, you've got to start really being selective about where you want to live and the type of home that you want to live in. So I think there are a lot of considerations that you have to consider. But I think if you do plan to live here on a long-term basis, I think it gives you the possibility to really benefit from all that Italy has to offer. When you're only here for a set period of time, sure, you have some great experiences. But I do think with Italy, the longer you're here, the kind of better it becomes. In a way, it's a bit like a fine wine. It's not always easy, you know, I keep it real on this channel, but I do think you've got to give Italy time, piano. Not everything presents itself in the first 6 months. Sometimes the best things happen 2 or 3 years later. So that's why I think sometimes when you're here on a long-term basis, you really get to experience that. However, if you're here on a short-term basis, that can also be good in a way, because you don't have as many kind of commitments to this country, which means that you can be a bit more free and easy in your approach to life here. It's not so important where you live. For example, if you choose an area that you don't like so much, well, you're only there for a few months. You know, it's not so important like all the work commitments and everything else that can be very heavy in a way when you're planning to live here on a long-term basis. You're here just to have an experience for however long it lasts. You don't intend to put any roots down here. And so I feel that you approach it from a much more carefree perspective than if you intend to live here, when you've got to be a bit more serious about your approach. Now, I will say, if you plan to live here on a short-term basis, as I've mentioned, I don't think necessarily you will get to see all of the different aspects of life here in Italy. You will see a selection, but certainly not the full magnitude of what you would if you chose to live here on a long-term basis. And I also think as well, when you live your life in this way, as much as it can be really nice for all of the incredible, wonderful experiences you will have, you also lack in a way a degree of permanence. You lack the ability to sustain long-term connections with people, because we've all been there, I'm sure. Yeah, I'll stay in touch with you. Yes, exchange numbers. And then you never hear from each other again. Because you see, in Italy, connection is very, very important, but it takes time to build. And if you're here for a short-term basis, maybe you don't have the time to build those connections to a point where you can sustain them when you leave. So I kind of think short-term and long-term in terms of stay here really does depend on what you want from your experience. And also it's going to tie back into the first point, which is your stage in life as well. Like, if you're planning to retire, that is a bit of more of a long-term consideration than if you're just here to, I don't know, experience some work. I think overall though, whatever your reason is for wanting to move to Italy, and whichever one of these considerations I've spoken about today applies to you, I do believe there is a lot of benefit you can gain from moving here. It is difficult. It might make you pull your hair out at times, but boy, oh boy, is it going to help you to grow in ways that you could never have imagined. And I just think it's so important that you surround yourself with the right people that can help you to believe this, and you don't surround yourself with people that will only want to share their negative experiences. Because this is the thing, I always believe that if somebody is overly negative about life here, why are they still here? Actions always speak louder than words. And you see a lot of people remain here, some through obligation, yes, maybe work commitments or family commitments, whatever it may be. But we can all have a choice in life. If we're not happy with something, we can easily choose to not do it as much as we choose to do it in the first place. And so if people are negative about moving to Italy or negative about their experiences here, the fact that they may still be here talking about that tells you really everything that you need to know. I'll see you in the next video.